back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Margaret Callahan, who I have known for a few years now. She is the National Director of Pet Partners, which is a therapy animal organization. So welcome, Margaret.
Thanks, Colleen, for having me.
I'm so excited you could join me today. I've been sort of stalking you for this interview because there was a topic I really wanted to talk to you about. But before we dive into the topic, I would like you to tell people a little bit about Pet Partners. What is Pet Partners and why should they know?
Well, everyone should know Pet Partners because I suspect if you're listening to Unleashed, you are someone who believes deeply in the power of the human-animal bond. And that's sort of at the heart of what Pet Partners does. Is our primary activity is our therapy animal program, where we register 9 different species of animals and their handlers to go and make volunteer visits in facilities all across the country and actually even in all across the world. We're moving internationally as well. So we have volunteers who go to hospitals and nursing homes, make hospice visits, do reading with children in libraries. We even have teams who are visiting at airports. So any place where an animal can improve a human's health or well-being, that's where we like to find pet partners.
Yes, indeed. And I love that it's 9 species because we always think of dogs.
We do. And the vast majority of our teams are dogs, but not everyone is a dog person. And I always say, different people find different animals therapeutic. So to those therapy cats out there, I salute you. I've owned cats for many, many years in my life, and I have never had a cat who would love to do this, but they are out there, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. My cat would not love to do it, but he is very, very social, and he does love to be with his people. So that's pretty awesome. So on a cat aspect of that. So the topic I wanted to talk to you about was the concept of just enough. I feel like we're always striving for more, and that our society really promotes that idea of whatever you have is good, but it could be better. And you live on a little farm called Just Enough Acres, and I love that name. And so tell me a little bit about how you happen to name your land.
So my husband and I decided that we have a daughter now who she's just about 6. She's turning 6 next month. When we started thinking about moving out to a space where we had more space and could have more animals and things like that, it was about 4 years ago is when we started sort of our search in earnest. And I have, for those of you who know me, I have a little bit of a tendency to have sort of a go big or go home approach to aspects of my life, where, I feel like if I'm going to do something, I'm really going to commit and I'm going to do it big. And it's not like, it goes from like, well, you could make Christmas cookies or you could rent a chocolate tempering machine and take confectionery classes and make handmade truffles for all your friends. Like, I sometimes have trouble with my limits. And so as we're thinking about looking for property and wanting a small farm, in my mind, I was like, this property looks good. And my husband, Seth, who's a little bit long-suffering and very patient with me, he'd be like, it's 25 acres. And I'd be like, it sounds perfect. And he's like, maybe we scale that back a little bit. We didn't want to commit to property that became burdensome for us. We wanted it to sort of be life-giving and fun and exciting and a great place to be without thinking that every time we came home, it was like, oh, it's just so much to handle. So we ended up finding a wonderful little farm and home on 3 acres. And in my mind, 3 acres wasn't enough. Like I had been like 5 acres, maybe 10, but I felt like I needed space. But as you look for farms, you find either a great house, but not quite the right property, or you find a great property, but not quite the right house. And we found this place, and so much of it was really what we had been looking for. And so Seth kind of got me thinking about this, like, no, it's just right for us. It's just enough. It's enough of what we need. And then sort of the concept of naming our farm, and we landed on Just Enough Acres because it is. 3 acres is enough for us. Now, would I be sad if suddenly I woke up one day and we had 10 acres? No, I wouldn't. But 3 acres is just enough for us.
And how many living souls live on your acres? How many are you responsible for feeding? Maybe that.
I have the animals I have, Colleen. Can we leave it at that? No. We have, right now, 3 dogs and 2 cats, 8 miniature goats, 10 chickens, 2 ducks, and a miniature donkey. So it's in the 20s somewhere. I try not to count too closely.
No. It's better to count individual animals, too. I mean, like, by species. That sounds better.
Yeah, right? It does. And then, of course, my daughter, who is in kindergarten and it shares much of the animal responsibility, and she's a deep lover of animals. So having her be able to be on a farm during her formative years, I think is a wonderful thing for her and for us.
So I love that. I love both that you have trouble with limits and that you found just enough. So from the idea of trying to find that spot for ourselves, what would you say are some of the things people need to think about when they're trying to decide, am I pursuing more because I need more, or am I pursuing more because of some other reason?
Yeah, I think my husband was right in that it's, at least for me, really important to find the balance of not just what I can do, but what I'm happy doing. Because sometimes I find myself, I'll push myself because I can do more, because I consider myself a capable person. But at some point it tips over to that I'm not enjoying what I can do. And, so the juxtaposition of me having this sort of go big or go home mentality in parts of my life, and then also being sort of a type A perfectionist person, like those two things are problematic sometimes. Because if it doesn't work out the way I have envisioned it to work out, I can be really self-critical, which is not life-giving at all, right? I mean, it's draining, it's exhausting, it's disappointing. And so to try and find that just enough space for me is a place where I'm doing what I enjoy, and there's a challenge to it, and I have the opportunity to be successful. But if something doesn't go quite right, it also doesn't feel like just a disaster, right? I'm not going to beat myself up about it. There's a part of me that was thinking like, gosh, if you need lessons in humility, move to a farm. Because it is a constant sort of dance between doing things and at one moment I'm like, I am a pumpkin savant. I grew pumpkins this year and I have beautiful, huge, amazing pumpkins for fall all over the place. But then if I don't try and think too hard about the fact that none of my onions grew at all. There was just total disaster, right? And so for everything that does go well on the farm, I have equal amount of stuff that just totally flops. And I'm at that place where that's balanced enough. I'm getting enough wins that I don't have to beat myself up about the losses.
I think the point about becoming self-critical when things don't go right is something that many of us can relate to. I think it's real common. And I'm not sure if it's just common across the population in general, or if people drawn to animals also tend toward that, because I absolutely see it in all the different animal care professions where people are really driven to meeting a standard that they've set in their head. Mm-hmm. And that standard is golden and shiny. And what they produce is really, really great, but perhaps not as shiny as they hoped. And then they beat themselves up that I should have done better, should have worked harder, all of the pieces. Right. And that's really hard. And do you think that comes from a spot of comparing ourselves to others, or just really comparing ourselves to these standards that are unrealistic?
I think some of it is unrealistic standards. I think in today's world, you don't have to spend much time on social media or any of the other ways we sort of stay connected to people and society. And everyone's life looks shiny and golden compared to yours. Now, you know yours, and you know the fact that there is a load of laundry in the washer that you should have dried 3 days ago, and you're going to have to rewash it because it smells so bad. And you don't see that about other people's, golden, shiny lives from a distance, that you think, God, they're doing everything great, and it looks amazing, and they're making a difference in the world, and you have no idea that they ate cereal for dinner last night. And so I think part of it is that we see the best part of other people's lives. We don't see all of it. And if we did, maybe we'd have more realistic expectations of ourselves. Because people look at our lives and they go, gosh, that's amazing what they do. And we don't think that about ourselves because we know about the stinky laundry. I think that's a big piece of it. And I think also, to your point about do people in sort of animal care professions do this? I think there's something so like being around animals does make me optimistic, right? Like I want the very best for the animals that I work with, for the programs that I help create that have to do with animals. And so I hold myself to a very high standard because I love animals really deeply, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to do the best that I can by them, just like people feel the same way about their children, right? And so when I think about, what I did on the weekend and I go, gosh, I should have done more work with my donkey. We're working on having his feet picked up. He was a rescue. He's got some baggage. And I was like, I did work with him for a while, but not as much as I could have. And if I had worked with him more, then, I think in my mind that translates him to being him. He's happier. He's more well-adjusted, and really, he's not unhappy with me. I'm unhappy with the fact that I have unrealistic expectations about how I can spend my time. So,
and I always have unrealistic expectations of how long things take. So when I'm like, I have never actually had the experience of thinking I should go work with my donkey because I've not had a donkey. But there are definitely all sorts of things, including working with my own dog, where I think, I have time for that. And then the day goes by and the next day goes by and the next day goes by. And I'm like, where did my time go?
Right.
And trying to figure out what that balance is and where just enough is, just enough time on this and that and the other thing. So it's an interesting thing. And the point about seeing other people's lives, because I am a Facebook friend of yours, and I always think your farm pictures are so fun because they're so very different from my life, which is in a perfectly nice suburban community, but none of my neighbors have chickens or ducks or mini goats. I mean, seriously, mini goats. Everybody melts. So it's a whole different world. And then I look and I'm like, she is killing it. So I'm happy to know you have cereal for dinner some nights. I often have cereal for dinner.
It's a breakfast of champions and a dinner of champions as well.
It's easy. It fills me up, and I really don't care.
Right.
It's just enough. Just enough. So, from that perspective of helping us become a little bit more realistic about what we want and what we're going to do, what would you suggest we do?
I mean, it's hard. My mind, you said that, the first thing my mind went to was the fact that my daughter's in kindergarten. And so we're doing all this sort of kindergarten-y stuff, right? And this idea what are the things you should ask yourself before you do something or take an action? Like in terms of like what they're trying to train all these new little kindergartners who are in a class together are. And it's like, is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it truthful? Like, if you can answer these questions about it, then yes, you should do that thing. And I feel like we should have, like, as adults, I need my own list like that kind of a little bit. Saying like, is this benefiting me? Is it benefiting others as well? I think sometimes I do things to a detriment to myself because I'm wanting to give to someone else or something else.
Yes.
Right? I think many of us get caught up in that. Doing things for our colleagues, doing things for our spouse, for our children, because we want to be giving, but then we're not being thoughtful about taking care of ourselves at the same time. And for me, that's a big place. I have to keep redrawing that line for myself and reminding myself, no, it is okay. Like, yes, the handmade Halloween costume might be a really wonderful thing, but not if it means I'm only going to sleep 2.5 hours. Trying to find that balance constantly. And just remind myself that it's not selfish to take care of yourself and to make decisions that take your needs into account along with everyone else's.
Yeah. I don't know why that's such a hard lesson to learn, but it's, taken me 50 years to learn it, and I'm still working on it. So it's clearly a hard lesson to learn. But it's this whole concept of we are really raised with the idea that it's important to help others, and we buy into it. We absolutely, yes, I'm here for you kind of deal. But then any thought of taking care of ourselves or, acknowledging, oh, no, I actually do need to get some sleep seems selfish. And maybe that you're not a good person if you were to say, no, I absolutely have to get some sleep and I'm not going to get that done. And that's not right. And it's not true. And the more we put a little self-care in, the better we are able to serve others and to do all of the things that we mean to do. But we get stuck there over and over and over and over. Everyone I talk to talks about that, where they just say, I have to, establish some boundaries, and that's so uncomfortable. And I've never heard anyone say, I'm fabulous at boundaries. Although maybe one of our listeners will share that, like, I'm fabulous at boundaries. And we'll all go, you're next up on Unleashed at Work and Home.
Reveal your secrets to us.
Because I think it's a really tough thing. But some of the challenges also come from our own internal stuff, because I'm going to tell a family story here, and then I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope my sisters don't listen. So we had a situation recently where a party was being held at one sister's house, and the other sister was helping to organize it. And sister number one was just going crazy, just making everything perfect. And sister number two was like, there's a just enough level, and it's good. Sister number three, that's me, was just going to show up and attend the party. So, I was like, oh, there was all this backstory. Who knew? But one of the conversations that we had, sister number two and I, was that sister number one didn't have to go that far. She didn't have to work that hard, that everyone was going to have a fabulous time, even if she had just, slapped paper towel on the table and said, here we are. There's your napkin and your plate. Paper towel is multifunctional. And it was an interesting thing because I think it was a difficult concept to realize that the party didn't have to be perfect. The people who were coming absolutely love these sisters of mine, and I absolutely love these sisters of mine. And nobody was holding her to the criteria that she was holding herself to. And it was really a tough spot because she was stressing herself out and denying sleep and all of those things. And we kind of do it to ourselves a little bit. And knowing that we do it doesn't stop us from doing it.
Well, and to me, I certainly resonate with that story. I mean, I think it's something we've all experienced on some level. And to me, when I find myself in that spot, what I try and figure out is, so I've established these high standards. I want it to happen this way, whatever this way is. But why? How did I arrive at this is the standard? Just like how had I arrived that 10 acres was the right amount of acreage? I've never lived on a farm before. I didn't really know. But in my mind, I was just pretty sure that was the right number. And so how do we arrive at those things, and what's driving us to that? Is it how we think people are going to perceive us? Is it actually something that's going to maybe, I don't know, maybe someone does have more fun at a certain type of event, or an event. I certainly know when I know things are organized, I'm able to sort of relax and enjoy myself more because I know that no one's going to have to remember to put toilet paper in the bathroom because I did that last night. So there's pieces of that too, but I don't even know why I'm driven to certain levels. I mean, I have trouble figuring it out for myself sometimes. I suspect we all do.
Yeah, I think we all do. It's fascinating, though, that it's such a common challenge for us, that we all sort of struggle with it and have that issue. Are you familiar with the psychology terms satisficers and maximizers?
Yes, I believe I am. And I don't know where I fit in there. I'm not sure I want to know.
Well, I think the reality is, well, first off, for anyone who isn't familiar with these terms, satisficer, which is such a funny little word, is it's good enough kind of person. And a maximizer is the person who will keep hunting and exploring options to find the very best. And the reality is we all have areas in our life where we're satisficers, and we all have areas where we're maximizers. So we've both acknowledged that we're satisficers in terms of dinner. We can totally do cereal for dinner. Satisficer. We're fed. Yay. But there are probably other areas in our lives, and they'll be different for each of us, where we're driven to find like the very best option and explore all of the pieces. But it's an interesting concept to think about, because some people spend so much time trying to find the very best, or to be the very best, or to define what that would be, that they never actually find a level of contentment or satisfaction with it. And that's when it becomes detrimental. Like, if you want to evaluate all the criteria and buy the very best Honda, fabulous, go for it. But then you have to be able to set that aside and move forward, and not keep evaluating the decision and say, well, was that the right one? Should I not have even gotten a Honda after all? Or, and it's an interesting thing, because on the one hand, satisficers come across as if they don't care. But what all the research says is satisficers get really good options. They just might not get the very best, but they're not getting bad. They're not, it doesn't meet criteria. They're just not getting the ideal perfect one. And so I think that concept is an interesting one to think about from the perspective of what's enough. How do we know?
Well, and it reminds me of a phrase that we use sometimes here in the office, that, that idea of don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Mm-hmm. Right? That you can still do good things and make good choices, even if there are limitations that don't allow you to do it the way you think would be perfect.
Yeah.
And honestly, in most of our lives, right, we have limitations around how much money or resources or time we can spend on any one thing, but it doesn't mean by default that it's then not good.
Yeah. And I think that's so true, perfect being the enemy of good, and then we get stuck again. I think the advice that we give to other people and the advice that we give to ourselves is so often very different. And that having the ideas where you're saying, like, really evaluating, how did I come to this standard? Why am I holding myself to this standard? Is this good enough? Am I shooting for perfect when good is out there? Are all very, very valuable things for us to be doing. Which, again, like you said, lessons in humility, where you get to wake up and learn it again. You don't necessarily just need to do that on a farm. So from the perspective of really trying to stop and evaluate those standards of, where did I define this standard? Where did I come up with this idea of what it needs to be? And not letting perfect be the enemy of good. How would you suggest we incorporate that? Like, how do you notice when you're getting stuck in that cycle?
For me, when I start to get to a level of self-reflection that I feel like is too self-critical, that's when I know I'm stuck. And oftentimes I have to remind myself, like, people aren't judging me the way I judge myself. Like, I think the vast majority of people who have to interact with me for work or pleasure or family or what have you, think I pretty much have a pulled together life, right? I'm not a total train wreck. And so,
I would agree with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I have to remind myself that although I think a lot of my pushing myself to do more and more is because I want people to perceive me as effective or successful or insert other positive adjective here, the vast majority of the time they do already, right? But somehow that's where I feel like I need more. Like, they need to think I'm more successful or a better cook or, really good at training goats. I don't know. It's probably ridiculous. And I have to remind myself that there's a level of ridiculousness in that. But again, it's somehow, I think maybe what it is, it ties into sort of my self-identity, right? I think we all have things that we know or we believe inherently we're good at that define us. We're moral people, we're truthful people, we're smart people. We do things that we care about animals, we care about our family, we take care of people, we're thoughtful. And so, what are the activities that define sort of my self-perception and how I want other people to see me? But then again, it's, well, yes, but that's just enough. Like, me making sure my family eats a dinner every night doesn't have to be a cheese souffle, right? There is a level of just enough there, and I'm still very successful in that. But I think maybe the enemy of that is, like, do we have time for that self-reflection, right? Like, can I slow down enough in the moment to be like, dial it back, Mary Margaret. What is going on here? And maybe that's what I could do better, right? Here I am being self-critical about me not being able to be less self-critical, but there you have it. It's a cycle.
It is a cycle, but I think that having some triggers that tell you when you're stuck is really helpful. And I think a lot of people don't know when they're stuck until they're very, very, very stuck. So the earlier we learn to recognize for ourselves, oh, that's one of my signs, the better off it is. Mine are, I'm craving chocolate, and I have no patience to listen. So it's like people are talking, and I'm like, yeah, get to the point. Like, ooh, okay, there's the moment. Okay, time to take a little break. Have a little reflection. Start over, because it's never about them. It's never about what they're doing or any of that. It's about that I have spread myself too thin, and it usually is self-inflicted. It's usually that I've said yes to too many things, and then I just need to live on chocolate and have people text message me, I guess. Something like that. I'm so charming. It's nice to reveal all these secrets in podcast form. People are like, she's a mess. And it's true, but that's okay, because we're learning to say, good enough. Have just enough time for the things that are important. You got to make the time for that. So I'm not sure if I have another just enough question. Is there a just enough question that you're thinking I should have asked you?
No, I think you've done just enough, honestly, Colleen.
Have I done just enough defining our just enough, the level of satisfaction? Okay, well then I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions. And I know you have your puppy Zeke with you there today in the office.
I do.
And the question I like to ask is, if Zeke could speak English, and I asked him, tell me about Mary Margaret, what would Zeke say to me?
So Zeke is not quite 4 months old yet. So everything is very new to Zeke. He's been with our family a little over 2 weeks now. I think that Zeke would tell you that I'm good at belly rubs, and that I try to be patient when sort of communicating new things and new expectations. It took us a long time to figure out how to go downstairs, but we worked on it and we got there, which is good because we have to go up and downstairs to get into the office. But I think that I'd like to think all my animals actually at our farm would say that I try and sort of meet them where they are and recognize that everything's a growth curve. That's certainly true for puppydom.
Yes. Well, that's awesome. And I think that pretty much does describe my interactions with you, where you have definitely met people where they are and bring people along the growth curve, and you're always so positive about it, which is really nice.
Well, thanks.
Well, thanks for coming on Unleashed today to talk about just enough, and how if we could all start figuring out what just enough is, we might be just a little bit happier. That would be
Indeed.
Awesome.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Colleen.
If people wanted to learn a little bit more about Pet Partners, where should they go?
Visit us at petpartners.org, and this is for more than people that just have animals. If you don't have an animal currently, but you're a big believer in the human-animal bond, we do have things that we do, grassroots advocacy and things like that, to support good legislation that supports the human-animal bond. So visit us at petpartners.org to learn more.
Awesome. I will make sure to put that in the show notes as well. And so thank you so much for listening. We enjoyed having you today on Unleashed Mary Margaret. And if anyone is interested in learning more about any of the programs that we have at Unleashed in terms of coaching or group projects, that's all available on the website, ColleenPilar.com.